All right, the next record is a DKIM record, also called a domain key. And this one is 3 times as long as what you're seeing in this value because it just goes on and on and on. It's an encrypted code, basically. Remember, it's the signature, supposed to match on the front and the back. It's a text record type. The host name is provided. The value is provided. We don't make this crap up. It just happens. It's also known as a DKIM record, domain key. It's like a digital signature, and it has a very long character string that's in your DNS records with your domain, but this character string is also in every email that you send out. So remember the heart necklace that's supposed to fit together so we know, like, we're BFFs, right? How do they know we are who we say we are? This is one of the ways, because the signature matches. It matches with the domain settings, and it matches inside the email that you just sent. That same character string is in there. So you are who you say you are. There you go. On this one, I don't know if you can see this, but it says V equals DKIM1. That's the version. They haven't advanced very far, have they? We just saw an SPF version 1 and a DKIM version 1. When are these people going to move forward? Anyway, it's version 1. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, which I won't get into, but this big long string after the P right here is the key. That's the encrypted key that has to match. At the beginning of every single host name for a DKIM record, there's something right here. It's going to be something _, domain key, whatever. This something is called a selector, and you also pretty much don't choose that one. There's slight instances where you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just take whatever they give you. But there's a different selector. So when you see these, they're not all going to say your business. They're not all going to say whatever the selector is you saw in the last one you did. They rotate them. Sometimes they'll give you 2 DKIM records because they are trying to keep you even more safe than if you only had one, and they'll rotate the DKIMs. So they're like, we'll use this one for this 6 months, and then we'll switch and use this one for 6 months. So you put them both in there, and then the person that's doing the vendor that you're using is rotating them on their back end. So it's a generated record. It's provided by the vendor. And optionally, they can give you more than one. So here's an example where you can have more than one of these weird email records for the same domain, because they might provide you with a couple of them. And then finally, there's a DMARC record. This is always going to be _DMARC for the host name, but you get to decide what you want to put in it. So this is where things also get really complicated for a lot of people, because they're like, oh my gosh, what should my DMARC record be? And then they start searching on the internet to figure that out. And they start grabbing whatever they find on the internet or whatever their friend Bob showed them. And they start throwing stuff in. And then they're wondering why things are broken with their email, or it's not working properly, or, whatever, right? Stuff's going to spam. They don't understand it. This record tells the receiving provider what to do with your email if something's not quite right with your other records. So if you don't have your DNS set up properly for email, this record comes along and goes, well, here's what I want you to do about it, Mr. Email Service Provider that I'm sending stuff to. And you only need one DMARC record. It covers both the root and the subs. Some people will put in a DMARC record specifically for their subdomain. It's completely unnecessary. It can happen, and it's not breaking anything unless the 2 records are arguing with all the little special stuff you put in them. But you don't need 2 DMARC records. You only need one, and you can cover what you want done with the root domain in there, and you can also cover what you want done with the subdomains in there if you want to do something different with them. So there's a version in here. It's always going to be V equals DMARC1 in all caps. And then there's a policy, P equals something. And the first policy is none. So it might be V equals DMARC1. You saw that right here. V equals DMARC1, semicolon, space, P equals none. This is the version. This is the policy. The version is not going to be different. It's always the same. The policy, you get to make a decision about. How do you want the receiving email provider to handle it when your email shows up and something's not quite right? None says, just let me on through, do nothing. Please accept my email into your space. That's a great starting point if you don't know if your other DNS is set up correctly. Because if you set your policy to something other than none, and you don't have your DNS set up correctly, then you may be breaking your email. So sometimes I'll see posts on Facebook, people are asking like, hey, what do I do about the DMARC record? And somebody will jump in and comment, oh, just set it up this way. And they'll tell them to do a P equals reject, right? I'm like, that is a very bad idea. Don't get your information through a Facebook comment, by the way. It's probably not also a good idea. Quarantine is the second policy option that you could choose. And that says, if I show up and my DNS isn't quite right, please send the email to spam. Who wants to do that? That's a policy I just wouldn't use. I don't even know why I would choose that one. Even if, first of all, it's not going to be my email going to spam because I set up my DNS records correctly, so I don't have to worry about the policy being quarantined. But if you were spoofing my domain, I wouldn't want to send your email to spam. I would want it flat out rejected, right? This is the strictest policy. Reject the emails entirely. And I love the policy for what it does. I don't love it for people who are just learning how to set up their DNS because they're not really sure if they've set it up correctly. And if you say reject my email if something's not set up right, like I said, you may be breaking your own email. Because if something's not set up right, they'll be like, okay, you said to turn it away at the door and it's going to comply. This DMARC record is just set to P equals none right now. Those are standard records with optional tags. So remember I told you there's some stuff that's the same no matter what you do, and there's other stuff you get to make decisions about. So the V equals is a tag, the P equals is a tag, and there's a whole bunch of other blah, blah, blah equals that you could put in there that are also tags, but all of those are optional. The only two required elements or tags for a DMARC record is the version and the policy. If you're looking at a DMARC record that's a mile long and you're like, why is all this stuff in here? Do I need it all? Technically, no, you don't need any of it. You just need the version and the policy. Most vendors don't provide you the DMARC record because they know better. They know if they said, go put in this DMARC record, that you might already have one. That'd be bad because then you'd have two records basically telling them what to do and they're going to argue, remember? Or if they tell you to put in one and they say set it to quarantine or reject, that's also not good service from whoever's telling you to put that record in if your tool is telling you to do that because they don't know if your other records are set up properly. And this isn't just for the one little domain you're using with that service provider. It's for every domain, every subdomain that you have on that account, right? So when you put in a DMARC record, it affects all domains, the root and the subs. So if somebody says, put in this record, think twice. And I'm going to tell you a story about this because I want to really seat this in. I know there's a lot of like A, B, C, D, E, F, G stuff going on here. Isn't that fun? You guys know who that is? Thor. It's Chris. It's Thor, right? So I love Google searching. Google searching is just fun. I went on Google search and I was like, fake ID. And some dude actually tried to pass this off and got caught. That's a beautiful government picture, by the way. Anyway, I'm gonna use this to seat this though, because I'm 54 now, okay? But when I was young, dumb, and stupid, I want to say 17, 18, my friend and I had fake IDs. Yeah. And we went around, we had a lot of fun. We went to some ho-dunk bars and, you know, danced and drank stuff we weren't supposed to drink. And it was fun. Like we had a good time, right? And they got to know us. And you know, after the first couple of times of going through, they're like, oh, hey, how's it going, right? Because we became sort of regulars. Like, cheers. Everybody knows your name. Okay, so then one day we got this wild idea we would try this new place. And I don't know why, you guys, because it was actually called the Meat Market. Like, why? Why would you go to a place called the Meat Market? But we did, because we had these fake IDs, and then we heard that it was really cool. And so we show up. And I'm walking in, and the guy at the podium, he's like, let me see your ID, which, you know, just internally, I'm like, oh, man. So he's looking at the ID, and he's asking us all the test questions, you know, well, what color are your eyes, and how much do you weigh, and all the stuff. And I had it all memorized, so I was going to pass that test. And my friend passed the test, too. And finally, after what seemed like forever, he motioned us on through. So we start walking past the thing, and up comes this guy, big guy, like big freaking guy, walks up and he goes, hey, let me check that. And the first guy says, it's okay, I've already checked it, they're good. And the big guy, we'll call him DMARC. Okay, are you following me? The big guy says, I'm going to check it again. So he does the whole 9 yards, and he had a different outcome, and their policy was reject. Okay, so out my friend and I went. We didn't go to the meat market, probably a good thing in retrospect. And the licenses, which weren't ours anyway, and frankly didn't even have our pictures on them. I have no idea how we got away with it so long. Those were held by Mr. DMARC man. And he said, you can come back with another piece of ID to prove it's you, if it is you. And out we went, thanking the lucky stars that we didn't have to explain to our parents we were going to jail, and also knowing that was the end of our bar bouncing days. But his job was to take a second look at the primary authentication for the bar. SPF, DKIM, everything good? No, something's not quite right. How do you want me to handle that, Mr. Bar? Policy reject. Out we went. You'll never forget what a DMARC record is now. And every time you see Thor, you'll remember that story. DNS records for subdomains. These are the MX records for one of my subdomains, reply dot whatever the subdomain was. And you can see that Mailgun provided 2 MX records for that. Remember I said you can have 1 set of MX records per domain or subdomain. So I have the 5 MX records I showed you previously for the root domain, and I have these 2 MX records just for this subdomain. And then I have a reply subdomain record for SPF. This is my sender policy framework record, my insurance policy that says Mailgun is licensed to drive email on behalf of this subdomain. Not my root domain, not any other subdomain, just this subdomain. And then this is the DKIM record. K1 just happened to be the selector that Mailgun gave me. I didn't choose it. It's just one of the 9 that they use. So I had to put in this piece. And by the way, this says K1, whatever the selector is, ._domain key dot, and then reply is the subdomain. So this DKIM record is just for the subdomain of reply. And then the DMARC record, remember, works for all of it. So you don't have to worry about this one ever again once you put it in. And if you do it really simply like this, you don't have to worry about it ever again. It's just there. It'll serve the purpose for all of those subdomains.